Okay, now originally what I planned to do was to mention the evidence that I discussed in my article on the age of marriage in this video, but I already made a video about that, so instead of making this video too long, I'm not going to present that information. You can just go back to the videos on the age of marriage and watch that as well. In this video, I'm going to present some additional evidence that I didn't mention in the age of marriage article. The Catholic Encyclopedia states that the marriageable age is 14 full years in males and 12 full years in females. This is under the heading canonical age in the Catholic Encyclopedia. Notice that it also says that betrothals could also occur as long as the person reached 7 full years in the contracting parties. It's also worth pointing out that Stephen Davies also comments on Mary's age in his book. On page 30, he says that Mary's age is a problem in the transmission of the Gospel of James. He says that even in ancient times, this was an early age for a woman to have a child, and so some manuscripts advance her age to 14, while even more give her age at this point as 16. In our culture, even 16 seems rather young, but our culture is the exception in world history. In most ancient cultures, a 16-year-old mother would have been nothing out of the ordinary. So he does question whether Mary was 12 years old at the time, although as we've seen already from the evidence, the Jewish customs of the time clearly indicated that 12 was the general age for marriage for girls. For boys, it was a little higher. Even then, he seems to levitate towards the final age, assigning Mary somewhere around the age of 16, at the time that she gave birth to Jesus. Now, again, from our standards, from modern standards, that's still pretty young. And according to the laws of most countries, a 16-year-old is still considered a minor. So that doesn't make it much better for the Christians. We have to think what this means is that God chose a minor girl to be the mother of his son, which is actually himself being incarnated in human form. Why would God have chosen a 16-year-old girl, even if that was her age? Even if we be a little conservative and just take the average between 12 and 16, which is 14, why would he have chosen a 14-year-old girl to be the mother of himself? Why didn't he choose someone a little older? Why didn't he wait for Mary to be a little older? Okay, in the next part, I'm going to briefly discuss some of the findings of Dr. Vern Bullough's study on the age of consent throughout history. This is from his article, Age of Consent, a Historical Overview in Adolescence, Sexuality, and the Criminal Law, Multidisciplinary Perspectives. Okay, so the first thing he mentions is it was almost universally coincided with the onset of puberty, the physical signs of which are clearly visible. In most cultures, this took place between 12 and 14 for girls. Talking about the Roman Empire, he mentions that the average age was 14. This is based on evidence from literature and inscriptions. But then he emphasizes that the term average means that there were both younger and older cases. He then moves on to discussing the Christian era. He mentions that before his conversion to Christianity, Augustine, who was a saint in the Catholic Church, was engaged to a pre-pubertal girl, someone who was less than 12 years of age. He didn't consider this immoral, even when he converted to Christianity. And Bullough himself states there's nothing to indicate that betrothal or even marriage to a pre-pubertal girl was unusual, although sexual relations in most cases depended on the appearance of the menses. All right, so that was the minimum. He then talks about how in canon law, the marriage age was individual biological maturity, first menstruation and first ejaculation. So this is again what I've said before. There was no set age. Right? Yes, in the Roman Empire, it was around age 12. That was the average fixed age. The rabbis also fixed the age at 12 at one point. But for a long time, there was no actual age because it varied from person to person. He then comments also on Prophet Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. He states, it is worthy of comment that Augustine, the most influential of the Christian fathers, and Muhammad, the founder of Islam, saw nothing wrong in being betrothed to a pre-pubertal girl. Neither, for that matter, did others. although they might abstain from sex until the girl had her first menses. This is what Muslims have always been saying. Bullough also discusses another example from Christian history. He talks about Gratian, the influential founder of canon law in the 12th century. He accepted the traditional age of puberty, 12 for girls and 14 for boys, for marriage. He also said consent was meaningful if the children were older than 7. So this is talking about engagements before a person reached puberty. He then talks about one of the most influential legal texts in European history. This is from the 17th century in England, by Sir Edward Coke, who made it clear that marriage of girls under 12 was normal, and the age at which a girl who was a wife was eligible for dower from her husband's estate was 9. So you can see how, even in European history, the age of consent was much lower than it is now. Interestingly, Bullough also refers to a popular sex manual. This is coming from European and Western civilization. This is not from Middle Eastern civilization. He mentions the most popular sex manual of the 18th century, and for much of the 19th as well, called Aristotle's Masterpiece, which talks of the joys of older men having young virgins as marriage partners. These virgins could be as young as 14. And then in this fictional account, the men who are in their 80s are seeking out younger virgins with whom to have sex with, and also perhaps children. And this was not considered abnormal. Finally, he mentions a very sordid and embarrassing episode of American history involving the beloved founding father Thomas Jefferson. It's well known that he had intimate relations with his African American slave, Sally Hemings. What might not be as well known is that Sally Hemings was only 15 years old at the time when Jefferson had sex with her and had many children from her. He was old enough to be her father. Now, this caused a lot of controversy. There was a scandal about it, and Jefferson neither accepted nor denied the allegations. But I read online there was a recent DNA analysis done, and it proved conclusively that Jefferson was the father of the children, and then the descendants of that relationship who live in modern times are his true descendants. So there's no doubt that he did have sexual relations with Sally Hemings. But the controversy was not regarding her age. It was regarding the fact that she was his slave, that she was essentially his concubine. And this caused a lot of consternation and controversy. Now, regarding Mary, we've already seen that the custom of the time was around 12 years of age, and the Bible didn't set an age. It specifically said puberty was the minimum requirement for marriage. Now, we've also saw evidence that Joseph and Mary were pious Jews who followed the customs of the time. This is why they brought Jesus to Jerusalem when he was 12 years old. Right. So now, if they followed the customs, it stands to reason that Mary's parents were also pious Jews, and they would have followed the same customs as well. So when she turned 12, it is completely reasonable to assume that they would have started looking for her future husband. And I think this is an important point. We've already provided ample evidence that the age of marriage for girls was around puberty, the onset of puberty. This is historical fact. The Christians want to insist that Mary was somehow older. In the words of the Islam critique guy, aka Dumbo, she was a mature, capable, independent young woman. The burden of proof is on the Christians to prove this. Right? If they want to insist that she was 16 or 17 or 18 or whatever the age they want to give her, they have to prove that. The historical evidence does not align with their assumptions. And the Islam critique guy tried to prove that, and we saw him crash and burn on that. All he could present as evidence was a couple of pathetic non sequiturs, which didn't prove anything, except that he's an incompetent researcher. That's all. Another important point I think is worth discussing is whether Joseph was 90 years old or not doesn't really affect Mary's age at all at the time of her marriage. Now, we know that many of the early church fathers actually did believe that Joseph was 80 or 90 years old at the time he married Mary, as shown in this list that is provided in an article on discoverthetruth.com. So you have a lot of heavy hitters here: Epiphanius, John Chrysostom, Cyril of Alexandria, Eusebius, all these famous names in Christian history. They did believe that Joseph was very old. But it's also true that all of these church fathers were believers in the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary. So there's a motive. There's a motive there why they would want to believe he was that old, as the Islam Critique Guide did point out in his video. That was one of the few things he got right in his video. That was a good point. That yes, there was a motive for the author of the Gospel of James or these church fathers to believe that Joseph was 90 years old. It was to perpetuate the idea that Mary was a perpetual virgin. That's the motivation. But that does not explain why Mary's age is given as 12. We can understand why they wanted to inflate the age of Joseph. But why would they want to deflate the age of Mary? 12 was the age at that time of marriage. And if Joseph's age was severely inflated, at most what it would mean is he was probably much younger. Maybe he was 14. Maybe he was in his 20s. I don't really believe that he was in his 90s at the time. I don't think the evidence really proves that conclusively. But Mary's age, there's nothing controversial about that. Being 12 at the time, that lines perfectly with the culture of the time. Also, there's no motivation for the author to deflate her age, as he did with Joseph's age by inflating it. Making Mary younger would not have done anything about her perpetual virginity. If she was a virgin at 12 or 14 or 16, she was still a virgin, so it doesn't matter at what age. It doesn't make sense to make up the age. There's no motivation there. So I think that's strong evidence that Mary's age is at least accurate, whereas Joseph's age has been severely inflated. But I can't see how they could inflate his age from 14, let's say, to 90. More likely, I think what it means is Joseph was a little older, maybe in his 20s, maybe in his 30s. There is one more question that we can ask, and this pertains to Joseph's age, possible age. As I said before, there's not that much information about Joseph, so it's very difficult to pinpoint what his exact age would have been when he married Mary. It's possible that he was as young as 14, because that was the custom of the time. But it's also possible that Joseph was previously married, and he became a widower, and then married Mary. This is an issue that has caused a lot of controversy. There's been a lot of debate among Christians about this issue. And the reason is because the Gospels are so vague on the issue of Jesus' siblings. Matthew 13:55, it says, the people were talking about Jesus, and wasn't he the carpenter's son? Wasn't his mother Mary? And weren't his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? But the disagreement among the commentators is surrounding the meaning brothers. Does it mean blood brothers? Does it mean stepbrothers? Does it mean cousins, as per Jerome? All of these theories have been proposed throughout Christian history, and there have been supporters and detractors, and no one theory is stronger than the other. They all have some strengths, and they also have some weaknesses. And if you go down this list, this is in studylight.org, it gives you the commentaries for each verse. If you read all the different commentators, there's going to be different views here. For example, Adam Clark says that they were Jesus' blood brothers. In other words, Mary and Joseph had other children. But if you go down, for example, if you look at Calvin's commentary, he talks about that they were most likely stepbrothers. All right, so the commentaries won't help us here, unfortunately, on this issue, because the Gospels are so vague. But I did want to talk about one possibility, one particular theory. The theory that the brothers that were mentioned, and the sisters as well, they were actually his blood siblings. In other words, Mary and Joseph's other children. There is a problem with this theory. As I said, all the theories have problems, but there is a particular problem with this one. You might recall in Luke 2, Jesus is certainly the firstborn of Mary, right? So he would have been the oldest child. If they had multiple children, he would have been the oldest one. In Luke chapter 2, verse 42, It says when he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. This means Mary and Joseph took Jesus to the festival. If they had other children and they were younger, why would they have left them in Nazareth and traveled to Jerusalem? This is a long journey. It would have taken weeks to go there and come back. Would they really have left their young children, who would have been under 12? So if these were Jesus's younger siblings, we have a conundrum here, a contradiction, as to why they were left in Nazareth. And there's no hint here in Luke that there were other children involved, right? That nothing is mentioned about other children. So this is another issue. The other possibility is that Jesus had stepbrothers. So that's the second theory, which would mean that in this case, when he was 12 years old, those stepbrothers would have already been older than him. So they would have already been adults. They would probably already have been married. So there's no concern there about leaving them alone. So this is one possible explanation for this conundrum, that there were other siblings, but they were half siblings, which would mean that Joseph had a previous marriage through which he had multiple children, both boys and girls, which would mean that when he married Mary, he was much older. He was not just 14 years old. I had suggested earlier that he could have been in his 20s or 30s, but that it was really difficult to figure this out. This lends credence to the idea that he did have children from a previous marriage, and therefore he was older than Mary, much older, at the time he married her. But then you have to remember that Matthew says that when Jesus was still an infant, Joseph had to take Mary and Jesus to Egypt because he had been warned by the angel to leave. Now, if he had other children, they would have been younger at this time, obviously. Would he really have left them in Judea, where Herod, the murderous Herod, was in charge? It doesn't really make sense. I mean, already the story in Matthew is suspect, historical suspect. Most scholars will say it's completely made up. But it does throw a wrench in the idea that there were other children of Joseph. So again, we're left with the conundrum. Since Matthew's account is more legendary, as we've seen already, Stevan Davies had mentioned legendary accounts of Herod's murderous intentions. If we get rid of that story, then the problem disappears. And we still have the story in Luke, which says that the 12-year-old Jesus was taken up to the festival in Jerusalem by Mary and Joseph, which would mean that if there were other siblings involved, they were older siblings, and by this time they were already adults and could take care of themselves. So this lends credence to the idea that Joseph was actually previously married and therefore was much older than Mary. Not 90 years old, but certainly in his 20s or 30s, maybe even 40s. It's difficult to tell, but definitely older. All right, so we've seen evidence that Mary would have been 12 years old. This was the custom. No reason to deny that. If the Christians want to say she was older, they had to prove that. The burden of proof is on them. And we've also now seen some evidence, intriguing evidence, that Joseph possibly could have been much older at the time. We can't say it for sure, but there is the possibility, and it makes more sense if we get rid of the legendary account of Matthew.
I agree with him here. I think if we had a video camera and we're back there, I don't think we would have witnessed it.